It was one of many small towns nestled in Normandy, France, occupied by Nazi Germany for years now. On the night of June 5th, 1944, its serene streets and humble homes were about to become the stage for a pivotal moment in World War II. As the clock struck midnight, the tranquility was shattered by the hum of aircraft engines. Paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division were being dropped into the area with a crucial mission: to secure St Mere Eglise and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the nearby beaches where Allied forces would soon land. However, the operation did not go as planned. Strong winds and navigational errors scattered the paratroopers across the countryside, and some even found themselves landing directly in the town square, right amidst German troops. One such paratrooper was Private John Steele. As he descended, his parachute snagged on the steeple of the town church, leaving him dangling helplessly above the chaos below. Steele, displaying remarkable presence of mind, played dead as the battle raged on, hanging there for hours in a surreal tableau of war. Despite the unexpected challenges, the paratroopers regrouped and launched their assault on the town. Fierce fighting ensued, with bullets tearing through the night and explosions lighting up the sky. By dawn, however, the Allies had gained control of St Mere Eglise. This victory was a crucial step in securing a foothold in Normandy and advancing the liberation of France. The bravery and determination of the paratroopers in St Mere Eglise have not been forgotten. The town's church steeple still displays a parachute in tribute to Steele's harrowing experience, and the Airborne Museum stands as a testament to the soldiers who fought and died there. St Mere Eglise remains a symbol of the courage and sacrifice of the Allied forces during World War II, a poignant reminder of the high cost of freedom and the incredible spirit of those who fought to preserve it. Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. Now, Jenn, before we get things kicked off, I want to remind our listeners that they can join in our kind of conversation on each of these podcasts and comment on each episode over at thehistoryroadtrip.com. But some folks have reached out and said, hey, how can I support the podcast? And you can do that over at thehistoryroadtrip.com. You can pledge for a month, you can pledge for a year, and it really is an opportunity for us because we don't make any money on this podcast right now. We haven't for a few years because this is really just a passion project for us. So if you've ever wanted to support, heading over to thehistoryroadtrip.com. It's a free email newsletter that we have. And if you want to, again, 99% of what we're going to do over there is going to be free. There'll be some occasional member-only podcasts and things that we list over there, but that's a place where we're setting up to further share our adventures. And for if you want to support, it's a great opportunity. And we have had some folks reach out and said that they were going to pledge, and we're going to turn on that opportunity here at the end of September, because the end of September will actually be, I think, the third anniversary of Talk with History.
Yes, and we are appreciative of any support or donations we can get for the podcast, because like you said, we have no financial backing as of today. And so it really does help us, because as we are a history road trip channel, so we actually visit these locations and it's not inexpensive to do. So we do appreciate any kind of support you can give. Please come on over there. Let us know what you think of these episodes. Let us know any suggestions you might have or places for us to visit, or any feedback, good or bad. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and we appreciate those out there, friends of the podcast like Doug, like Larry, who've pledged support over at thehistoryroadtrip.com. That is thehistoryroadtrip.com. Again, you'll also get a free email newsletter with kind of some more in-depth dives into some of our topics. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a town that a lot of our audience may actually be semi-familiar with, because it was featured prominently in Band of Brothers.
Yes.
And you got to visit there And this is a very, I'll call it American-friendly town in France. So tell us about St Mere Eglise, one of the first French towns liberated after the Normandy D-Day invasion.
Yeah, St Mere Eglise. Like, I had to ask people many times how to pronounce it over and over again. And it's also in The Longest Day. So most people will recognize it initially from The Longest Day. And then it does play a big role in Band of Brothers. But this town is synonymous with D-Day because of what it means for the Allied troops, what it means in the landing of Utah Beach and the Airborne. But it's an old town in France, and it's close to the Normandy beach. It's the first major town behind Utah Beach and not far from the beach, but it's also on a major roadway, the N13, which is this major road that the Allies would need logistically to get the tanks and the troops and the men into theater to fight the Nazis. So it's founded in the 11th century. So the earliest records date back to 1080.
Wow.
And the Latin name means Church of St. Mary or Holy Mother Church. So if you think of St Mere Eglise, it's like St. Mary Church or Mother Mary. So that's, the name is very Catholic or Latin Catholic.
And that kind of makes sense because the town chapel, the town church is very central. Right? It's
very central. And like back in the day, the 1000, that's what was the French society was based around, the church. And so the town was involved in the 100 Years' War. It was involved in the wars of religion. This is an old town.
That's so cool.
But when it comes to D-Day, it's such a significant part because it's right behind Utah Beach. And because it's one of the first places that is going to start to see action that night. From June 5th, from midnight on into June 6th is when the first jumps will start. And they start about 1:40 a.m. You're going to get the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne jumping in that area to support the landings of Utah Beach. Again, to take control of these roads logistically, to be able to get these tanks and these people into France. And knowing that the Germans have flooded a lot of the farmland, there's less roads available, and this is a major one. And so you're going to get this 82nd Airborne, 101st Airborne. Now, things don't go as planned. And people get scattered. That's exactly what happens to Dick Winters. He's far away from where he should be.
And I think that's because a multitude of things, right? In the opening, we said part of it's winds and then this, that, and the other. But also, and we talked about it when we did a lot of Masters of the Air content a while back, there was pilots and soldiers that were talking about some of these pilots who were flying twice as fast as they were supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, people are nervous.
They were nervous, and that's what happens in what they call the fog of war. You fly too fast, or the conditions aren't what you're expecting, and all of a sudden, these airborne troopers, rather than being within the area that they had planned on being dropped, they're getting dropped all over the place.
Yeah, and as much as you can practice this, you have to remember these pilots are relatively new. They've just been trained to be pilots. A lot of these guys haven't flown a lot of missions in war. A lot of these guys haven't dropped over theater yet. Think about it. This is our first invasion. This is America's first invasion into Europe, dropping troops. So those landings start about 1:40 a.m., but they result in heavy casualties because, like you said, going too fast. These paratroopers are very heavy. They're carrying 60, 70, 80 pounds on them. They're hitting these water areas, which I say are flooded, and they're flooded more than 6 feet or 7 feet, the basic height of a man. And when they have all that weight on them, they basically are drowned. And then there was bombing that also happened that night. And some of these buildings in town caught fire, and they illuminated the sky. So as these men are jumping, they become targets in the sky. And so the Germans, who are made aware of this attack happening, come out and are able to fire on these men as they land. And you get men who are descending and hitting telephone poles, they're hitting trees, and they're easily shot because they're not they're not cut down. And this is where you get the John Steele story.
Yeah. And so I don't think I realized until we started doing this, that's based on a true story.
It's a true story. It's a very unique story.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because of all the things to get hung up on, you're going to hit a church steeple.
Yeah. And then he plays dead probably for a couple hours. And I think you had mentioned in the video that eventually he's trying to cut himself down. He drops his knife. He alerts a German soldier. That German soldier tries to shoot him, shoots him in the foot. And then another paratrooper shoots that. So he actually gets saved because the German who was shooting him gets shot. His counterpart gets shot. Eventually the Germans capture him. But when the airborne takes the town, he takes the So it's a very interesting story, especially for a movie like The Longest Day, which I haven't watched yet. I need to go watch it. It's another John Wayne movie.
Another John Wayne movie. Red Buttons plays John Steele in it. John Steele is of the 505th Parachute Infantry. He's in the 82nd Airborne. So you get the 101st, 82nd Airborne that are jumping that night. And when I'll talk more about what the town looks like today, but like you said, he gets hung up on the church steeple. And today there is still a mannequin hanging from a parachute on the church steeple to tell that story, because it's a true story. And it's one of those fantastic truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Right? Like telling the truth is so much more amazing than a fictional story would have been. So.
Well, and aside from, you'll talk a little bit about the Airborne Museum that's there in St Mère Église. But it's also a way for the town to continue to recognize what these men did that day.
Yeah. So when you think about it, these first jumps happened at 1:40 a.m. By 5 a.m., a force led by the 505th Parachute Regiment took the town with little resistance. So think about 3 hours later, John Steele's hanging for 2 hours. He gets cut down. He's basically prisoner for an hour. And then the town is taken by 5 a.m. So it's one of the first towns liberated by the Americans. And that the town is so proud of that story. They were under Nazi occupation for 4 years. And here it takes a little less than 4 hours to take the town back. They just, even today, they embrace that story so much that John Steele mannequin is part of their town. It hangs in their town square. Now, I don't think it's on the right side of the steeple. I think he actually in real life was on the other side of the steeple. But because that doesn't face the town square, they hang the mannequin on the other side for the story. But like you said, he drops his knife. He gets shot in the foot. He's eventually cut down, but he does help capture the town. He goes on to keep fighting. The church has since become very much like a shrine to the paratroopers, and they have stained glass windows with the Virgin Mary and paratroopers beside her.
It's really cool. If you haven't seen our video, the link will be in the show notes of this podcast. I would encourage you to go see that, because one, the movie The Longest Day, we put some clips in there so it's a good representation of what happened that day. But two, you got some shots of the stained glass, and it was really neat because I actually missed it the first time when I was looking through the footage, and you said, hey, no, go back and look at this. And so I was able to zoom in, and you can see that stained glass. I've never seen stained glass like this before with, you see kind of the Saint Mary, you see Mary there, classic pose, head bent over a little bit. But then on the sides right next to her are paratroopers in their paratrooper green with a helmet on and boots and a parachute in stained glass. It's really beautiful and it's really neat.
Yeah, and like we have spoken before, for so many things to go right that night. I mean, things went wrong, but so many things to go right that you didn't have as much of a defense by the Nazis and for this town to be liberated so quickly. We believe it was some kind of divine intervention there. And so for the town to embrace that and put it into something permanent like stained glass with the Virgin Mary beside paratroopers, it's just a very interesting thing to see. They also have a Joan of Arc in there and just a generic depiction of Jesus, but it's a very beautiful church. The church still has remnants of bullet shots and things in the side of the church. So it's very much still just a relic of D-Day, and you can go and see it. And the town square is just beautiful. But they love the story of D-Day and the liberation of their town, so much so that I was there that day, 80 years later, and they had parades of American tanks, all these Frenchmen and women dressed as Americans.
Yeah, it was really neat.
It was very neat. And they just embrace Americans so much that there is a monument there to the 82nd and the 101st Airborne. And people leave poppies and different things there, but they've just embraced that story. And if you walk around the town, there are different areas with little plaques and things about different paratroopers that fell into this backyard or into this greenhouse or into this garden and what they may have come up against or what happened to them. And even in different areas, they still have parachutes that they'll hang over trees and things just to give you a sense of what the town felt like that day, that morning when all of these parachutists basically descended on the town.
Yeah, it was really neat to watch it and seeing the footage, the parade footage with, I mean, these are old tanks that was even just neat because you don't see that in the States, right? You just don't see parades like that. And these are legitimate old World War II tanks that they're driving through the town. It was really cool to see it.
It was really neat. And when you think about these roads are basically a tank wide, and they're driving these tanks down these cobblestone old roads and people are loving it and they're waving and they're just having a great time. And these tanks look legit. Like they could have just been made yesterday. They've taken such good care of them.
It was so cool.
So what else they have in St Mere Eglise? If town square, walk around, again, see the plaques to the different airborne that were there that day, but they have the entire Airborne Museum is there. And that was a great museum to show what the airborne kind of went through that day. They have an example of what it's like to board a C-47 aircraft and jump from a C-47 aircraft. You get remnants of it in Band of Brothers, when they're all lining up and you have the red light that goes green and they just start jumping on the static line. It's the same kind of feeling. You go through, you walk through, you get to see what it's like, dark night, the jostling of the aircraft, not knowing where you are, and you're basically just jumping. It also lets you see the amount of weight these men are carrying on them, because besides their jump gear, they're carrying on whatever ammunition they need. They're carrying on whatever gear they need, and just all the weight they have upon their bodies as they jump not only makes them fall to the ground faster. And since these men were going low and fast, that was put them in danger, but just the sheer weight, if they're going to hit water, they're just not going to have the time to cut themselves free. And that's also when men were hitting burning buildings or burning areas. They didn't have the time to redirect themselves because it's so fast and you're so heavy that you don't have that opportunity to avoid the fire. So you have cases of that as well.
If you ever get a chance to see somebody parachuting or something like that, it looks like they're falling relatively slowly. You don't realize, and you and I think you did it for my birthday or something one year. We went skydiving. We did a tandem skydiving thing. And so I was strapped to somebody who knew what he was doing. And when you're falling, you realize how fast you're falling. But then also you don't realize that when the parachute pulls, it's not violent. You slow down. But then when you get closer to the ground, you realize how fast you are still falling. And that's modern day parachutes. These are World War II era. The airborne concept is still relatively new, a few years, and all the gear and all the other stuff that's going on, right? You add all of that stuff up together. What these paratroopers were doing and how they were jumping in is pretty incredible and very, very dangerous, especially at the time. Like today we have much better equipment, much more control for your average parachuter coming down. So it really was incredible what they were doing.
It was. And this town has embraced that story. And that museum has embraced that story. They actually have, the gliders were also a big part of that day. And they have one of the only examples of the Waco glider there that you can see it. So gliders are big. If we ever talk about the Pegasus Bridge, the English had the gliders where you could get about 30 men in a glider.
Yeah, we referenced them, I think, in last week or the week before's episode.
And it's quiet. You don't hear it. And they can land, and they can really land right under your nose. That's why they took the Pegasus Bridge so easily. But they have an example of it in there. I want people to remember too, paratroopers, as much as they're known for jumping is just the easiest basic part of what they're doing. They're soldiers. They're there to fight. They're infantry when you think about it. They're there to fight. Jumping is just how they get there. And once they're there, they become soldiers, ground troops.
It's a smaller part of their training than people realize.
Yeah. And so, getting the jump right is so important, but getting the jump right is the easiest basic part. And then you're going to have to start fighting a war. And that's what, when you see in Band of Brothers, jumping in is how they get there. But it's really when they get on the ground and then they have to start doing the tactics, the ground tactics, that it comes into play. So you're like double the soldier there. But I really loved being in that town. I recommend, if you're going to go visit France and Normandy, you have to go to St Mere Eglise. I think of all the towns associated with D-Day, it is the most important one. It is the one that was in support of Utah Beach. It is the first one liberated. They have embraced that story there. They love Americans there. You can see the mannequin of John Steele on the steeple there, and it's just a place. They have recently unveiled a statue of President Eisenhower.
Oh, cool.
General Eisenhower, as he preferred to be called, but in full World War II uniform. So it looks like the statue at the D-Day Memorial and the statue at his Presidential Museum in Kansas. So that is also right there beside the steeple as well. So it's a great place to go and visit.
Yeah, it was a fun video to make because it's much more able to be a little more celebratory with a video like this, and the topic was really, really neat. With the successful securing of St Mere Eglise and the other key towns on D-Day, the Allied forces turned their attention to using these strategic points to push further into occupied France. The beaches of Normandy became a crucial supply and reinforcement hubs for the advancing troops. From these beachheads, the Allies initiated Operation Overlord, the code name for the Battle of Normandy. This involved a series of meticulously planned operations to break through German defenses and liberate occupied territories. One of the first objectives was to link the 5 beachheads, ensuring a continuous front line and facilitating the movement of troops and supplies. As the Allied forces advanced, they encountered fierce resistance from entrenched German troops. The hedgerows of the Normandy countryside provided natural defensive positions, making progress slow and costly. Despite this, the Allies pressed on, employing coordinated infantry, armor, and air support to overcome the obstacles. Key towns such as Carentan, Caen, and St Lo became major battlegrounds. The capture of the French port city Caen, in particular, was critical due to its strategic location and transportation network. The British and Canadian forces faced weeks of intense fighting before finally securing the town in mid-July. The liberation of these towns allowed the Allies to establish vital supply lines and command posts, enabling them to sustain their push into France. The breakout from the Normandy beachheads culminated in Operation Cobra, launched in late July 1944. This offensive aimed to exploit the weakened German positions and achieve a rapid advance through the French countryside. The operation succeeded beyond expectations, leading to the encirclement of German forces in the Falaise pocket and their eventual retreat. With the German defenses in disarray, the Allies surged forward, liberating Paris by the end of August. The momentum continued as they drove towards the German border, liberating town after town and village after village. The successful use of the Normandy beachheads and towns as springboards for further operations was a testament to the meticulous planning and bravery of the Allied forces. Their efforts paved the way for the eventual liberation of France and the ultimate defeat of Nazi Germany, marking a turning point in World War II.